a lot, by the way, for inviting me to the Magic meeting. A long time ago, I used to attend these meetings, and it's so great to see some very familiar names and faces virtually. I hope that we can reconnect. I invite you to stop if you would like and ask me questions. I think this is meant to be a dialogue on where we're going in data science at NIH. And just to let you know that although I am a co-chair for a NIDR Big Data Working Group, what I'm showing you is strictly NIH's vision for data science. Other agencies may find different priorities, of course. So our vision is really to think about data science as a modernized and integrated, fair, and I'll explain findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable biomedical data ecosystem. So that's what I'm going to show you, what we're doing in data science at NIH. So first, I want to tell you where we want to end up. So it's like a roadmap. It's always good to know where we're driving to. And there are a few different types of use cases that we really want to enable and finally get to. And these are at a pretty high level, but I'm happy to drill down if you like. And the first really is about thinking about our data platform. So you probably know that NIH has invested a considerable amount of funds in different types of studies. I'm showing you here the Framingham Heart Study, a very long longitudinal study of heart disease in a sector of our community. We also have a lot of data platforms in mental health and Alzheimer's, and wouldn't it be really wonderful if we had the ability to link the data and the information and maybe even the tools and software in the Framingham Heart Study funded by NHLBI with the work that we're funding in Alzheimer's health data at the National Institute of Aging. But, you know, in order to just understand better correlative effects in aging and heart disease. And this seems like this should be a pretty straightforward thing to do, but in fact it's really not, because these are completely different systems. The data that I'm talking about has a lot of privacy and security concerns. And so linking our high-value data assets and data platforms, while on the surface seems pretty, you know, like it should be a doable problem, it's really a very technical and culturally difficult problem to do. But this is where we'd like to be in 5 years, just to allow researchers to basically scan across our data platforms and look at the data that they have access to and analyze it in new and creative ways. Slide 4. I want to tell you about something that's from my own field, and it's sort of the story of dark data. So imagine when I was a researcher working on the rhodopsin protein, which is an important protein in the visual process. Rhodopsin also happens to be a really good study for drug receptors because it's a G protein receptor, and about 50 or more percentages of the receptors for drug targets are G protein coupled receptors. This is a cryo-EM image of rhodopsin, and what you can do, of course, is imagine if you could take other types of structural studies of proteins, such as an absorption spectra, or even imagine being able to also take and combine together energetic studies of chromophores bonding within the rhodopsin. And all of these figures that I show you are coming from publications, and underlying those publications and tables and figures are data, but most of this data is not really accessible to the researcher unless, of course, you write to the PI and ask for the data, and if you get it back and in the right format, you might be able to use it. But imagine if we were able to quickly obtain access to the data and any related information in published articles in such a way that you could find it and cite it. So this would be a really great boon for a lot of science, but it's relatively straightforward. It just takes a little bit of work. And finally, and this is something certainly of interest to NIH, imagine that you were able to take the data from your own electronic healthcare records and link that with biophysical and biochemical data from processes that are going on in your expression of your proteins or your modification of proteins, or expression patterns or post-translational modifications of processes in your systems, and link that with actual data that's contextual about you and in your environment, such as the data that will be coming from the All of Us program. The ability to link our electronic healthcare records with our personal data and our clinical and basic research data is certainly a goal of NIH. It's both technically and culturally a very challenging problem, but we think we can make a lot of progress with this. And so I'm going to tell you about what we're doing in this area. And finally, with the new capacity of artificial intelligence, and also something that is of great interest to me personally is the convergence now of on-chip computing, sort of edge or fog computing, with artificial intelligence and high performance or cloud computing, marrying these advanced technologies in order to really analyze data on large scale, or to, in this case, remote sensing or drug delivery. So I think that there's an awful lot of capabilities here in thinking about the convergence of algorithm and compute, both in sensor and in cloud. So this is sort of the promise of where we're going with the strategic plan for data science, and now I'm going to tell you about how we're getting there. And in order to do so, I have to sort of give you a visual aid for the strategic plan, and this is on slide 8. It's divided into 5 general areas, and I'm going to talk about each of them: data infrastructure, modernizing our data ecosystem, data management and analytical tools, workforce development, and sustainability and stewardship. But I don't want you to think of these as 5 different silos of excellence, but rather to think of this more as a very integrated and collaborative ecosystem, and such that communities, workforce, data ecosystem, infrastructure, and tools all work together under the FHIR principles. Again, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data and tools. So I've been working on this since about October, and I'm going to tell you in each of these elements what we're doing and where we're going, and also maybe hopefully get from you some ideas for challenges that we're facing. So on slide 12 is the actual FHIR elements: making sure that data has unique identifiers, labeling it so that we can search, making data accessible and retrievable and open systems, and also providing systems for authentication and authorization that can span different resources, making sure that data can be reusable such that researchers can understand how that data was created with the appropriate metadata, the appropriate licenses. And finally, making data interoperable, making sure that data can at least speak the same language. I can guarantee you that findable, accessible, and reusable are probably something on the horizon, and interoperable is incredibly difficult, and I think that will be much before we're FHIR. And why is this so important for NIH? So this is a heads up of where we're going. We are developing a data management and sharing policy. The status is the following. About a year ago, we solicited input from the community on what would be critical elements for a data management sharing policy, and we received about 190 submissions from national and international stakeholders telling us where they saw the benefit and some of the challenges with a proposed policy. One of the important challenges that were identified by the community was that policy and implementation must go hand in hand, such that whatever policy we develop, we have to make sure that we have put in place enough of an infrastructure so that researchers can actually understand and comply with the policy. It would do no good to give researchers an unfunded mandate to share data. We've heard that. We've drafted a draft policy for data management and sharing. We are going to release this policy. It is already late summer, and my understanding is that this policy will be drafted for release in September for the community to comment on the actual policy. We'll leave that open for 60 days. We'll take that feedback into consideration, and then we'll release the final policy in early 2020, with it going into effect most likely in FY21. This is my understanding of where we are right now with actual data management and sharing policy. It's fairly likely that the policy may say something to the effect that data that underlines publications should be made fair and accessible. it may go beyond that as well. So we'll see. And I'll just take a moment right now to just make sure that there are no comments from the community, because I know that this is a big deal. All right, good. So that, moving on, we did hear you that there are many different ways that researchers may want to think about sharing data and making data findable and accessible and reusable. Interoperable, we know, is going to be a hard ask, but at least making it findable and accessible and reusable. So I want to give you an overview of different types of options that we're working on for sharing publication and related data, and this is on slide 14. As a first stance, NIH will strongly encourage the use of open access data sharing repositories as a first choice for our communities, and there's a list at our website for all of the NIH funded data sharing repositories. There are other ways to find repositories, and we will certainly provide a lot of helpful tidbits on our website in case you are looking for a repository to share your data. But there are other options, and these are scaled according to the size of the data set. For example, I'll tell you what PubMed Central is doing to store publication-related data and materials up to about 2 gigabytes, and also their use of global identifiers for data that's in supplementary materials. I'm going to tell you about an early pilot that we're doing with a commercial entity to store data that is basically orphaned, that has no data repository, like the data I showed you earlier that might be coming from spectroscopy or might be coming from calculations. Here you'll be able to store data up to about 20 gigabytes. Finally, I'm going to tell you about our STRIDES partnerships with Google and Amazon. This is a little bit early days, so I'll describe what we're doing, but there's not a lot of platform there for sharing data. It's just still mostly very early days. And again, I really want to reiterate that NIH does strongly encourage the use of open access data sharing repositories, and I'll tell you how we're going to sustain those shortly. But before I do, I just want to point out what we're doing in PubMed Central to make it very visible to the community and to readers of articles how you can find data related to a publication. And here I pulled out an article that I'm particularly interested in, the autolysosome biogenesis, regulated by a couple different ATPases, and the associated data is right there under the authors, and you can see it circled in red, and it's part of the supplemental data, and so you can see that you just click on the zip file, and there's a global unique identifier that's in gray. So this is just one way that researchers can share data through publications. And we're working with many of our journals to make sure that we can get the data from the articles, find it a unique identifier, and then also push it to our NHLBI's progress report. So that's an element that's coming in the near future, is to push all of your data into your progress report so that you get credit for it, like you do for your publications, on your progress of your research grant. So I want to tell you about a pilot that we're running for data that basically doesn't have a home. It's a pilot with Figshare, and we just want to understand the scale of the landscape of the amount of dark data that could be out there and might want to be shared by researchers. So it's a pilot for approximately 12 months. I will tell you what we hope to gain by the end of this pilot, and I want to stress that this is a pilot. It is not the end game. It's just the start of the conversation. But we really want to understand, for dark data, making it openly accessible, assigning it a unique identifier, providing specialized metadata templates for researchers, making sure that the metadata is indexed with schema so that it can be discoverable in Google and Bing and other search engines, allowing researchers to link their grant information and grant numbers to the data. And again, we're going to be working to push those back out to your progress reports so that you can seamlessly keep track of your publications and your data through your grant work. If you need to apply an embargo to your data sets, that will be possible. If you need to have a particular license with your data set, that will also be possible. We're interested, and you may be interested as well, in tracking the metrics of data use and data sharing. And of course, all this in the goal for fair implementation of data. So again, we are allowing that all the data that's submitted to Figshare pilot has a DOI so that we can support data citation, usage, and metrics. And we are standing up a pilot platform that is openly available. I think you can deposit up to 20 gigs, and it will be exported to other NIH systems using application program interface. Where will we be at the end of this pilot? We really hope to understand better for us the data repository landscape. We want to understand where the gaps are. That's the part of the pilot that we really need to know. And we want to understand the relationship between domain-specific repositories and generalist repositories such as Figshare. We want to understand the usefulness and characteristics of these repositories so that we can strengthen all data sharing repositories and make it easier for researchers to find, share, and access and reuse data. That's the goal of the pilot. So that's where we'll be in a year, and we'll make an assessment of the pilot and then move forward after that. Okay, I'll take a pause to see if there's any questions about what we're doing in making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, mostly that underlines publications, figures, and tables. Great. So now I want to tell you about the next steps. I've told you about how we're making data, findable and accessible and reusable by researchers. I want to tell you how we're connecting our high-value data ecosystems. And in order to do that, I have to tell you a little bit about STRIDE. So STRIDE, Science and Technology Research Infrastructure for Discovery, Experimentation, Sustainability Initiative. That's quite a lot. But what it basically is it's a partnership with Google and Amazon to provide discounts to researchers and their institutions on the cost of cloud storage and compute, and that is all it is. So it's sort of a lower barrier to cloud computing. We are offering a number of training and bootcamp opportunities with our STRIDE's partners, mostly Google, but also some with Amazon. We, NIH, have also taken the initiative to move a number of our high-value large data sets to Google and to Amazon. Because these data sets are controlled by ICs, the ICs have determined which cloud provider they'll be hosting these data on. Some of them are on both, some of them are on Google, and some of them are on Amazon. But you can see the list of the data resources that we are moving to the cloud. I think that actually many of these have pretty much moved. I want to highlight one in particular, and that's resources from NCBI. It's up to 12 petabytes. And so from my understanding, you, the community, can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, this is probably the largest biomedical data set in a cloud environment. It's one data set, it's 12 petabytes, and so this provides a lot of questions, challenges, and opportunities. So we have a large-scale metadata search and retrieval issue. This is 12 petabytes of data. The metadata is larger. We're curious if there are AI algorithms and data that can work at scale. This is I'm sure that there are. I'm not sure that they've been done and applied in the biomedical field. We're interested in inference of anomalies. For example, the data that I'm speaking of is mostly gene sequences. We'll certainly be also putting large image data sets up on our cloud provider partners. So we're looking for algorithms that can work at scale at 12 petabytes or larger. And we're challenged by data compression, data duplication, data quality issues. It's a messy data set, and that's probably going to be true of other data sets. Some are very well curated and really can be a gold standard for AI, and some are just a big hairball mess. So there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges moving forward, but still, it's an exciting time for us. I'll tell you that we anticipate right now that at this time next year, we'll have 50 petabytes of data on our cloud partners. And this is a wonderful, wonderful time for NIH and working with cloud partners. We're moving a lot of our data environments to Google and to Amazon, for example, our Commons data framework. The data resource that I told you about earlier that deals with mental health, our Kids First data resource, the data stage from NHLBI, and finally the Anvil from NHGRI. And all of these are in various stages of robust and hardening. They have users. The users are very committed and working in those environments. And now what we'd like to know is there a way to connect these resources such that if you are an NIH investigator or an investigator who would like to work with these data sets, can you log on once and access fully? In other words, can we just make it a little bit of a lower barrier for you to log on and get access to the data that you already have requested access for, given the constraint that we would certainly like to make use of industry standard technologies like JSON tokens. Many of these systems that I've described have been highly engineered. We don't want to have an expensive re-engineering program. That's not the goal, so do no harm is my mantra. And I think we can do it. I'll just highlight just where we are in this process. We're looking at basically a federating authentication authorization for a number of our resources. We're working primarily right now, if you're fairly knowledgeable about NIH, we're looking right now to authenticate based on ERA identities, but we're also looking at ORCID in particular. You might have seen a notice from NIH where we're requiring that trainees obtain ORCID IDs so that they can be matched to their ERA IDs. That may be something that we further investigate in the future. And there are other login authentication protocols of Google, for example, and so we'll be working to bring those on board as well. Authorization is more tricky. The data that you are authorized to see is handled differently in each resources. Sometimes, if you know NIH well, we do it through dbGaP. Other times it's whitelisted. This is in particular true for our mental health data archive. So we're looking at building basically translational services so that we can read in all of the authorization protocols for each resource and then translate across so that we can, through our token process, understand the user, their role, and their data set access. So this is what we're working on this year. And this is basically a view of how it's done technically through our virtual directory systems. And where we hope to be, of course, is to develop a minimal viable product where we'll be establishing trans-NIH authentication. Authorization will be a little bit more limited as we pilot this out, and we'll also, just for those who are interested, be working on standardized auditing and logging protocols. And of course, using industry standards is important. We do not want to re-engineer all of our systems. We want to certainly be flexible to support future standards as might be developing in GA4GH, for example. And NIH has a lot of policy around data access, and so we are in part driven by our data access policy as well, and that's something that we'll be looking at in the future. So I'll pause for just a moment to see if there are additional questions about what we're doing to connect our NIH data resources. Okay. If not, I will move on to tell you what we're doing to engage a broader research community. So you may remember that I talked about integrating our electronic healthcare records with our clinical research records with basic genomics data, for example. What we're doing is we're adopting and expanding on FHIR, Fast Healthcare Interoperable Resources. FHIR, developed by HL7, is designed specifically for exchanging electronic healthcare record data between healthcare providers and insurance companies, and it has a really interesting component that's rolling out for claims data. It really allows patients and providers to access records through mobile devices, web-based application, and cloud services. it has hundreds of applications. It's widely used. We have put out two important notices. One is a guide notice to let researchers know that we are encouraging the use of FHIR in our basic and clinical research. We understand that this might be somewhat new for many of our researchers, so we're just encouraging the exploration of this. And we've also put out a notice of special interest for our SBIR and STTR applicants to know that we are interested in receiving applications from small businesses to develop apps based on FHIR standards. But we're doing quite a bit more that we can discuss probably later this fall. And the reason why we're doing this in part is to take advantage of the amount of data that we are generating now and certainly in the future. And I did mention earlier that we have an awful lot of applications in biomedicine, including text mining, monitoring sleep, looking at genomic sequences, understanding radiological images. These are all key areas of application for AI. This might be of interest to you. This is from FY18. It's what we're funding in machine learning, because that's the keyword that I can use to do the search. And you'll see that many of the applications in 2018 were machine learning had to do with either image analysis or systems pharmacology or precision modeling and early detection and screening of mostly cancer and other types of tumors. In case you aren't aware, we understand that there are a lot of ethical and legal challenges with artificial intelligence. We've stood up an AI working group of the advisory council to the director. Some of the challenges that we've recognized through the working group is that there's no clear rules for consent for data use. There certainly are threats to privacy. For us, a concern particularly is the potential for bias and discrimination based on training sets that are not completely inclusive of the populations for which we want to study. And of course, there's always the misuse of data. Just very quickly, this is the ACD working group and its membership. The charge is really fourfold. It's to understand the opportunities in AI for NIH across many different diverse fields, to understand how NIH can build a bridge between the community that's mostly in the NSF computer science and DOE computer science community and the NIH biomedical community. What can we do to facilitate training that marries biomedical research with computer science? And how can we identify and understand some of the ethical considerations that have to do with using AI in developing these algorithms? Some of the themes that came out from the working group include making AI data more readily available for researchers, helping researchers bridge the gap between computer science and biomedical research. In other words, making researchers have a better multilingual ability, understanding our ethical, legal, and social implications of AI, new algorithms to advance AI, and new areas which AI can be applied to. I'll just quickly mention some of the points that came out from the working group. That here AI can be used for us, having a training set for AI that is especially sensitive to underrepresented and marginal populations is particularly important. It tends to be difficult to have clinical trials that represent the population writ large, and keeping people in their clinical trials is another challenge. We certainly want to make sure that there are guardrails to the ethical deployment of AI, that there are quality standards for developing more rigorous frameworks, and finally that there are strong oversight and accountability for the use of AI. So finally, I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing in workforce development. This past summer, we had a graduate science program where we brought in 13 master's level students from area universities, including George Mason, George Washington, Johns Hopkins, Delaware, and Georgetown. These master's level students worked in our intramural research program on difficult and challenging research in data science, and we will certainly be running this program again next summer, so we look forward to inviting even more students to come and work internally at NIH on challenging problems. We also invited 9 undergraduate fellows from computer science programs across the United States, everywhere from Yale to Berkeley, I think we even got one from Wisconsin. Here, these undergraduate fellows worked in administrative offices and centers at NIH. They worked on developing AI algorithms to help us spin the over 4,000 applications that we get every year into different types of categories so that we could easily transfer those applications to the correct programs. They worked to develop automated processes to onboard researchers into strides. They worked on programs to help us look at electronic healthcare records quickly using optical character recognition. So they really did quite a lot of work. They spent 10 weeks here. They were wonderful young people. We would love to have them back, and we will certainly hopefully continue our partnership with Coding It Forward to bring in additional undergraduate fellows to NIH. We will announce fairly soon a National Data Science Senior Fellowship. This is a 1- or 2-year national service sabbatical to bring in experts from academic and industry settings to work in very difficult and challenging data science and technology problems. Here, researchers will be working with large volumes of data and or different computing architectures. We're looking for people to work on things like the All of Us program or the HEAL, Helping End Addiction Long-Term program. We hope to bring in 5 or more fellows starting in 2020 and going forward every year for 4 years. So this is the vision that we have for data science and where we are in implementing the vision for a modernized, integrated, and fair biomedical data ecosystem. Again, I hope that I've convinced you that it's an integrated program that we're looking at where all of these activities from workforce to data infrastructure go hand in hand to help make data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Nobody really works on this by themselves. There's been a lot of people and a lot of teams of folks. Here I'm just listing a few of the folks whose work I'm highlighting today. And I want to just thank you very much for allowing me to come to Magic and tell you a little bit more about what we're doing in data science, and certainly stay connected and let us know where the challenges are so that we can be reactive and hopefully also strategic.